So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I want to welcome everybody this evening. And I'm going to give you a brief run of the show, which we did last night. We're going to start it off with a welcoming. Miss Linda Bridges is going to do the welcoming for tonight. And she's going to introduce Susanna. And Susanna is going to introduce our moderator. And our moderator is going to introduce the candidates. So again, my name is Demetrius Johnson. I'm the Vice President of the League of Women Voters for Voter Services Committee, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Linda.
Thank you, Demetrius.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Well, welcome attendees and candidates to the candidate forum for the 5th Congressional District. Hello, my name is Linda Rigby Bridges, State Board Director for the League of Women Voters of Georgia. Now I just have a few housekeeping rules. So for everyone who's on either device, which would be a laptop, an iPad, a phone, just look at the bottom right of your screen. For those who are looking at a desktop or a laptop, there's an icon with 3 dots labeled the word more. Click on it and you'll have options that will allow you to have a more interactive experience during our programming this evening. You can select the chat to enter comments or the Q&A will be open for questions. You can also use the hand icon if you choose to make a comment. So some of you may not have been familiar with the uses of these devices, but just sit back and relax. So I want you to turn your volume up, mute your lines, sit back and relax on this rainy Georgia evening. I would like to now introduce our state president of the League of Women Voters, and her name is Susanna Scott. Susanna is a native of Georgia who was raised in a politically active family, which discussed politics regularly at the dinner table. She has a Juris Doctor from Georgia State College of Law and a Master's of Law from Trinity College Dublin. Help me welcome Susanna Scott.
Thank you very much, Linda. And I want to take a quick moment to thank the League of Women Voters of Atlanta Fulton for being the driving force behind this debate. They have been putting on some amazing debates and forums this election cycle, and we're really grateful for the work that they're doing. And I want to thank our candidates for being here tonight. It's very important that constituents get a chance to hear from all of you, so I'm grateful that you've all taken the time to be here tonight. And then I would like to thank and welcome Candace Presley. She is an award-winning journalist. She is a 2-time Hall of Fame member. She was inducted in 2019 into the Georgia Association of Broadcasters and in 2016 into the Georgia Radio Hall of Fame. She's the Director of Community Affairs for WSB-TV, and she drives the Family to Family project that leads the station's community efforts across its broadcast platforms, including WSB-TV and the company's 4 radio stations. On a personal note, I've had the chance to talk with her several times for People to People, and she's just delightful to work with. And I was so excited when Demetrius told me that she was going to be our moderator tonight. So Candace, thank you for being here, and I'm going to let you take the stage.
Thank you, Susanna, and it's a delight to be with everyone tonight. Indeed, it is a delight for WSB Television to be associated with tonight's forum. We believe very strongly in your voice, your vote, and we appreciate the opportunity to be a supporter of the Georgia League of Women Voters. It is now my pleasure to introduce our candidates. After our candidate introductions, I will come back to each candidate who will have an opportunity to make an opening statement, and then we will go through our questions that we have for tonight's forum. I'll ask our team at the League if I've missed anything to make sure that we proceed as we have all planned. Are we good, everyone?
Yes. Yes, we are.
Terrific. This is a debate for Georgia's 5th Congressional District. The winner of this election will serve the remaining term of the late Congressman John Lewis. The candidates tonight are in alphabetical order: Robert Franklin, Kwanzaa Hall, Barrington Martin II, Stephen Muhammad, Chase Oliver, Mabel Thomas, and Keisha Waits. Robert Franklin, you are first in delivering a 1-minute opening statement. And before you deliver that opening statement, I will remind the candidates that this is indeed a forum and not a debate. You will have 1 minute for your opening statement, You have 1 minute for your closing statement. You will have a minute to answer your question. Because this is not a debate, we ask that you answer questions and not attack opponents on the dais. There are not going to be any rebuttals this evening. So please use this as an opportunity to showcase your views and your desire to serve the remainder of Congressman Lewis's term. And now with that, Mr. Franklin, you may deliver your opening statement.
Thank you. My name is Robert Franklin. As a 30-year resident of the 5th District, I've had an opportunity to build a long track record of serving the community. Voting for me on September 29th will ensure that the 5th District has a vote in Congress during a time when key questions are being decided. With your vote on September 29th, I will immediately go to Washington to hold Donald Trump accountable, to represent the people of the 5th District. I will also focus on providing COVID stimulus checks to people and small businesses that are struggling to survive. I will also protect our sacred voting rights. As a minister, former president of Morehouse College, community activist, an educator, and advisor to 3 U.S. presidents, I am more than qualified to do what must be done until January. Vote for Robert Franklin and you will have a voice in Congress.
Thank you very much, Mr. Franklin. Our next opening statement should come from Kwanzaa Hall. I don't see him. Let me ask the League, has he joined the forum?
He does not appear to have done so yet, but I do know that there have been weather issues around the city, so that could be the reason he's not here.
We will then move on to Barrington Martin II.
Certainly. Good evening, everyone. My name is Barrington Martin II. I believe that we're undergoing a political renaissance in which the people are demanding more, and it's time for the government to deliver more. We are watching and we're seeing every day now people are hitting the streets to demand justice, but to also demand equity and equality in every facet of human life. Tonight, my opponents are going to tell you about their experiences. They're going to tell you about their past careers, as they built within these careers. But what they will not tell you is that the great Congressman John Lewis had all the experience, all the connections possible, but yet and still problems have continued to persist, and in troubling and worse times, these problems have gotten worse. Tonight, I'm going to discuss all the reasons why I'm the rightful candidate for this position through my bailout, the people's bailout, that is based on giving everyone within this society equitable opportunity and equal rights as well.
Thank you very, very much. As we go forward to assist the candidates, I am receiving time cues via the League, but to help everyone, I'm going to grab a piece of paper. And candidates, if you see me flash the piece of paper in front of the screen, that tells you you have 30 seconds, and that gives you a chance to know that how you are going to, how much time you have left before I have to say stop. All right, thank you very much. Mr. Muhammad.
Thank you. Greetings, my name is Stephen Muhammad, and I'm running to fill the remaining term of the late John Lewis. Even though there will be a winner on September 29th, the 5th District has been a loser for the last several months. When John Lewis was ill and receiving chemotherapy, when he passed, we've had a big vacant hole left in this district. And so what I will attempt to do is try to fill that hole the best that I can. And I know there are a lot of people that are grieving about what has not, the 5th District has not had a voice in all of the things that are going on right now in Washington, D.C. But once Stephen Muhammad is elected, and if you elect me, I will go and fill that void with a strong voice and with a strong program that will help us for the 90 days that we need to make sure that the 5th District is represented properly in all aspects of our needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next candidate is Chase Oliver. Mr. Oliver.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening to the League of Women Voters. My name is Chase Oliver, and I don't think any one of us will ever truly be able to replace the great John Lewis. But what I am doing is I am running to speak to issues that people have been protesting in the streets for months since the murder of George Floyd, the murder of Breonna Taylor, and the shooting of Jacob Blake, among many others. I'm fighting for criminal justice reform. I'm fighting to hold police accountable by ending qualified immunity for law enforcement. I am fighting to end the militarization of police so that we don't see armored vehicles shooting tear gas at our citizens like we saw just last night. I am fighting to end cash bail because right now we have a two-tier justice system in this country between the rich and between the poor. I'm also running to provide more choices and more voices in this race. The more voices we have in our political discourse, the better the discourse, the better the candidates, and the better the eventual congressman. We need more choices on the ballot and more voices in the debate so that we can hold our elected officials accountable. And I look forward to speaking more on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. The next candidate is Abel Mabel Thomas.
Thank you so much. I want to start off with, I am Breonna Taylor. I have a legislation in the House right now, House Bill 1209, that repeals no-knock warrants in the state of Georgia. I am a native Atlantan who is born, raised, and educated in the 5th District. My name is Abel Mabel, as I say, and the very name means service. I served as city council citywide and as state representative where I presently serve. I believe that we should have somebody in to fulfill the seat because we're being taxed without representation. I am the most qualified candidate for this race and the most accomplished state representative in the Democratic state representative in Georgia. I say to you, send Abel Mabel someone with experience that counts, leadership, and results. I will have the smallest learning curve, day one, ready.
Next, we will hear from Keisha Shawn Waits.
Thank you so much to the Atlanta League of Women Voters for this unique opportunity. I want to start the conversation by letting you know that I am a woman of faith. And so every single thing that I do is guided by a specific set of principles. And I think given the current climate nationwide, that is essential. We have people of faith that are serving. I want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. We have a short turnaround in this race. You will either serve 90 days or 3 weeks essentially. It is my belief that there are only 2 people in this race that have the state legislative policy experience necessary to move forward given the tumultuous climate that we have currently in Washington. There are a number of small business owners and families that are hurting. And right now we're without representation. And so we must send the most qualified candidate to Washington. I look forward to the conversation tonight.
Thank you very much. I've been told that Kwanzaa Hall has joined the forum. Kwanzaa Hall, you now have 1 minute to make an opening statement.
Thank you to the League for having me. Forgive my tardiness. I'm Kwanzaa Hall, and I'm running for Congress in the special election to fill the remainder of John Lewis's term. And now that the baton has been passed, we need a leader who can stand in the gap, be a bridge between the legacy of Congressman Lewis and Ambassador Young and the next generation of leaders. He was a neighbor and dear friend to me and my family. He and his late wife Lillian mentored me through high school, college, and throughout my 15 years on Atlanta City Council and School Board. So serving out the remainder of his term in Congress is not an opportunity to start building a political resume or to place a capstone on the end of my career. It's a personal obligation to continue the justice leadership in the 5th District. I will continue the leadership and the legacy and be a voice of the voiceless, ensuring that our democratic process remains just and fair, offering leadership that helps our country get a handle on COVID and holding leaders in Washington accountable. Thank you. I'm Kwanzaa Hall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hall. We'll now proceed with the questions of the candidates in the forum. The way the questioning will go is I will start in alphabetical order, and as we go to each question, I will then go to the next candidate in alphabetical order so that we don't have the same order of candidates delivering answers. And when we get to our closing statements, we will do those in reverse alphabetical order. My first question, and we will start with you, President Franklin, why do you want to serve in Congress if only for this short period of time?
3 principal reasons. First of all, I knew and loved John Lewis. We had many great conversations in his office about the role of love and nonviolence in transforming our political life. And so I want to honor and extend his moral, intellectual, and legislative legacy. Secondly, right now, as many of my colleagues have indicated, the 790,000 people of the 5th District have no voice and no vote, and yet critical questions are being determined and issues are being decided at this time. We also need to hold this reckless and incompetent federal government accountable for Donald Trump's behavior. And then finally, I think there needs to be a moral voice speaking into the chaos of our national crisis as we proceed toward an unusual and volatile election.
Thank you. Kwanzaa Hall, again, the question is, why do you want to serve for such a short period of time?
Yes, so I have a proven track record for getting things done. I've passed more than 750 pieces of legislation over the 15 years I served as an elected official. And just like you consider in the kitchen in your home, there are some people you can put in there for 3 years or 30 years and they would get nothing done. 3 hours, they would get nothing done. And there's another person you could put in for 30 minutes like myself, and I'd create a wonderful masterpiece of a meal. That is what I'm committed to doing for District 5. I was really committed to not running again for anything. But when this came up, I felt we've got a huge void, as we've seen what happened with Breonna Taylor's case and so many other cases here in Georgia in District 5. There needs to be leadership in our district, and I'm willing to step up to lead our country in the right direction. Thank you.
Barrington Martin II, why do you want to go to Congress for just a few weeks? It appears that we lost Mr. Martin. We will move on and go to Mr. Muhammad. Why do you want to serve for such a short period of time?
Several reasons, but I'm going to deal with, there's several reasons I wanted to run. One was to reform and to create a new reality in the 5th District. The other one is to have a roadmap, because there are so many issues in the 5th District that have been neglected over the years that I wanted to hold hearings. This is a real simple, just hold hearings and find out what are the major issues and how we need to resolve them. Put together a booklet so that the next person that comes behind me would be able to have a roadmap on how to solve the problems of the 5th District. See, the diversity and gentrification are new problems that are in the 5th District. So in having this roadmap, we will be able to solve the problems that exist. To stop the divisive gridlock, political gridlock. These issues are things that I want to help the 5th District overcome, the state of Georgia to overcome. And the way I would do it was create, through the power of the Congress, is a roadmap and a book that I can have and use. Yes, ma'am.
All right, understand. Thank you very much. Mr. Oliver, same question.
So I really have 2 goals in mind during this all too brief time I would serve if elected. First, it's been almost 4 months that the End Qualified Immunity Act has been introduced into Congress and has not yet received a committee hearing, much less a vote. I will fight every day that I serve to get that vote, because we do need to end qualified immunity to hold law enforcement accountable when they do wrong. The other thing that I would be seeking to do is to expand the Voter Rights Act to a 50-state Voter Rights Act so that we can fight voter disenfranchisement and voter suppression all over this country, because that's something that we can do to honor the legacy of John Lewis, who literally suffered throughout his life and fought throughout his life for voting rights for everyone. So those are the 2 goals that I have in mind running, but I would also be a voice to other criminal justice issues. And another reason I am running for this short period of time is to talk about the need to have more than just one party's voice and 2 parties' voice in Washington, D.C. We need to increase those voices. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Mabel Thomas, why do you want to go to Congress for just a few weeks?
Okay, I prefer to be called Abel Mabel. It's really my name. It's my name, but what I want to say is that I want to go to Congress because I'm able to get the job done. I've served in both bodies, the State House and City Council citywide. I have a legislative record that's comparable to, I mean, it's nobody to compare it to. I know that the federal government services have not been able to come down into the 5th District like it needs to be. So I would fight to make sure the unemployment benefits get extended, that we have livable wages, and that we make sure that our veterans are taken care of. So I would do what we call monitoring these departments, Veterans Affairs, the Commerce Department, where all the finance it is, to make sure that our small businesses are taken care of and that we can have some connection to DC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mabel Thomas. And next we have Keisha Waits.
So,
Where do you want to go? Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. As it's been stated earlier, Congress is currently without representation. Should this race go into a runoff, that will leave us without representation into midweek December, possibly on into the next year. There are a number of families and struggling small business owners that have received no support, that being SBA funding, PPP assistance, unemployment. And so therefore the 5th District has to have someone at the table while we're in the middle of negotiating COVID relief efforts as we speak. Next. Congress right now is having many conversations, and my colleague Chase Oliver echoed this beautifully. We're having conversations surrounding building new FBI facilities, bailing out Ivy League colleges, and certainly we must be willing to invest in our most precious commodity, and that is working families and struggling small business owners. And so it is imperative that we have someone at the table who has legislative policy experience to move those conversations forward.
Thank you. I see that Mr. Martin has rejoined the call. The question is, why do you want to go to Congress for just a few weeks?
Yes, ma'am. I would love to go to Congress for just a few weeks because I think it's important to have a new voice. I believe that we've been going under the same direction for years now, and there are new challenges on the horizon. And if we don't address those challenges with modern day solutions, then we're going to continue to be in this same disarray of politics that we're in now. I think that it's also important to speak out against the two-party duopoly that has monopolized the power away from the people. The power should have always been with the people, and now we see that corporate interests have infiltrated our government and removed the power from the people. So I just think that, being a young man and a millennial, it's just time for our generation to step up to the plate because we deserve to inherit the nation the way we see fit. And with so many new developments on the horizon, it's time to be proactive instead of reactive in addressing those. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now going to move into our second question, and that question will first go to candidate Kwanzaa Hall. What is unique about your leadership as a public figure in this environment? Kwanzaa Hall.
Well, number one, I'm not afraid to touch people and be engaged at the most granular levels from top to bottom. I have a special knack, and I say this with all humility, of being able to bring very diverse and desperate groups together who wouldn't otherwise be working on the same accord. District 2 in Atlanta was the most diverse district in the city. Average income in some parts of it was $3,000 a year to some of the most wealthy people in the world, like Ted Turner. And having the balance between the liberal establishment in Emmett Park, Bedford Pines, very low income, families that are challenged and facing a lot of obstacles of poverty, and the downtown business structure was very right wing and getting everybody on the same page working towards a common goal. That's the same thing we need in a broader District 5, but also we need that in our country. And I've been proven to be a person who knows how to bring people together, work on one accord, and create shared business for optimal outcomes and success.
Thank you very much. Mr. Martin, uniqueness of your leadership and a public figure environment.
The uniqueness of my leadership is based on the fact that I am legitimately able to bring people together. Evidence of this team, for example, I have Bernie Sanders supporters, I have Donald Trump supporters, I have Elizabeth Warren supporters. It's basically every presidential candidate you've seen within this political arena. I have different people who have or possess different ideologies that have come together under one common goal. I also possess the ability to understand situations and to understand and have foresight in situations. What I mean by that is, instead of taking the approach that the old-fashioned government way is allowing problems to occur, then to react from it, I understand the tools or the solutions to be proactive, to steer us away or to divert us from catastrophe. And I think that all of these combined together makes me the ideal leader because everyone has a say and everyone has equity within my leadership positioning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Same question now goes to Mr. Muhammad.
Thank you. Well, my uniqueness is that I've been on the front lines for all the systemic problems that exist in the 5th District. That's destructive gentrification, criminal justice reform, affordable housing, on the mayor's criminal task force, things that affect everyday lives of everyday citizens. Those are the things that bring my uniqueness to the table. Also is the fact that some of my colleagues have said that they would challenge President Trump and his issues. I'm coming to end the divisive political gridlock. President Trump will be in Atlanta tomorrow. From what I hear, they should go out and protest him since they want to fight him. I think that all of those who believe that should go. I want to bring him in and maybe get some understanding. People say that might be difficult, but I am for uniting the 5th District, not for dividing the 5th District in any way. That's why I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I'm an independent that believes in unity and unifying the 5th District because it's been divided too long. That's the uniqueness of my leadership. I'm not one-sided.
Thank you very much. Mr. Oliver, same question.
So I will echo my colleague Simmons here. I am outside of the two-party structure. I'm running as a libertarian candidate. Therefore, I do not hold allegiance to either the Republicans nor the Democrats in the House. I have allegiance to the 5th District and the people of the 5th District. To me, it is not about left versus right. It's about right versus wrong. It's about standing up for those who need to have a voice in this debate. It's about standing up for the single mom who is struggling to give her child a great education while she works hard. It's about standing up for the immigrant dreamer who is in this country working hard and wants to stay here because this is the only home they've ever known. It's about speaking up for those who are in the streets, out and about, fighting for criminal justice reform and taking those reform voices to the halls of power in DC. I can stand up and speak truth to power, whether you're the Republican or Democrat establishment, and I want to get things done. I want to build bridges, not walls, and get work done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oliver. Now we will hear from Abel Mabel Thomas.
What I will say is that at the end of the day, you already have to be a warrior before you talk about being one. You already have to be one. The reality of it is in the streets is where the people are, and that's where I've always been. So I spoke yesterday at the Breonna Taylor rally at Cleophas Johnson Park because I knew that I want to be with those young people who called it, which was Reverend Jared Sample and Mary Pat Hector. I also know that if we serve a 40-day session, which is a fast-paced session, negotiation, constructing legislation, getting legislation passed, getting money in the budget, and making sure the home folks are included in everything we do. There's no doubt about it. Nobody knows the street like Abel Mabel Thomas. I continue to live in the same house I was born in. People can come to see me. My brand is availability, experience, leadership, and integrity.
And last one to answer this question on uniqueness and leadership in a public environment, Keisha Sean Waits.
Thank you so much. One of the things that I really appreciated about the late Congressman John Lewis, civil rights legend and icon, was that he did not bring ivory tower politics to the conversation. For those of us who had the pleasure to work alongside of him, we recall he was a man of the people. I think it's important that his successor embodied that same spirit of service as well as equity and accessibility. So it's time out for this notion somehow that government is self-serving. Margaret Thatcher said something beautiful that I love. She said that you can either want to be something or do something. And I think oftentimes in politics, we have many who choose to be something versus actually accomplish something. And so I certainly look forward to the conversation tonight.
Thank you very much. And I misspoke. The final person to answer the second question this evening would be Dr. Robert Franklin.
Thank you. There are 4 distinctive features of my identity and experience that I think equip me to be the most compelling candidate for this office. Number 1, I teach ethics, and Donald Trump has none. Ethics is the science of right and wrong, of what is good and bad. And don't you think Congress needs a couple of lectures or sermons or talks about ethics in government? Secondly, I'm also a minister and a pastor. At a time when over 200,000 Americans, over 6,000 Georgians have died of COVID, we need someone who understands grief and can speak to that grief. Third, I've been a college president. I've worked with appropriations, with budgets, with diverse personalities on my board. And finally, I have also served as a community leader, and it's my desire to bring people together across the partisan lines.
Thank you very much, Dr. Franklin. Our next question: should felons who have served their time, served their sentence, be able to vote in the election? And we will begin the answers with Barrington Martin II.
Absolutely. When you've served your time and you paid your penance to society, then it's time for you to be reincorporated back into society. So I think it's not only important for felons to be able to vote, but it's important that our society has the measures in place to allow these men and women who have been incarcerated, who have paid their dues, to be ushered back into society in a great way where they can now be productive citizens. I think that we have to take an overall look at our criminal justice system, and within that, we have to take a look at how punishments are served, or just how punishments are given out. But to answer the question again, yes, absolutely, wholeheartedly, felons deserve to vote as soon as they finish paying their punishments to society. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Muhammad, same question.
Absolutely. That question hits home personally with me. I was arrested as a young man for a felony charge, carrying a weapon. They put me on probation. They gave me the First Offender Act. So it's been wiped away from my record, but I talk about it. I've never been to prison, but I spent a day or two, some time in jail. But that happened to me because I was walking around saying I was going to protect myself. But once you reform and you clean up your life, then life, everything that life has to offer, the American dream should be made affordable to you if you have reformed yourself and cleaned yourself up and decided to rehabilitate yourself and make yourself new. So yes, they should be able to have all of their rights once they've reformed, and we're making sure that they're not slipping back to the trap house or whatever it is that they do, so that they can be a productive citizen with gainful employment. I think that everything that the American dream offers should be open to them if they can proceed to get it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Oliver.
So to answer the question, absolutely, yes. Once you've paid your, once you finish your term and your sentence, you should absolutely be able to have your right to vote. And this speaks to the fact that we have an over-criminalization in society. 1 in 12 children in this country will grow up having an incarcerated parent throughout their lives. And that is just far too many. And one of the reasons we have this is because we over-criminalize our society. The biggest example of that is the failed war on drugs. The war on drugs is a $40 billion a year failure. It does not make our communities safer. And right now, you can blame the war on drugs for the reason why police were at Breonna Taylor's door in the first place. If we had not been fighting this failed war on drugs, she might be alive today. We also have to talk about all the other over-criminalization of nonviolent, victimless crimes that harm no one, but yet are made criminalized. So we needed to decriminalize our society. And yes, if you have completed your sentence, you should absolutely have the right to vote. Otherwise, you're you get counted in the census. You should also have the right to vote.
Thank you very much. Abel Mabel Thomas, should felons who have served their sentence be able to vote?
Yes, they should. And it's really just another form of voter suppression. And it basically affects people of color, blacks and people of color, because we are disproportionately represented in the prison system, and that parole and probation also further restricts their ability. I will say that in the Georgia General Assembly, I worked across the aisles, which is my area. I'm able to work across the aisle and work with the governor, Deal, to put in place reforms that would basically deal with the issue of reentry and try to integrate those who have been in the system to be productive citizens and get their footing so that they can contribute not just to the tax roll, but contribute to overall in the society. So I think my strength is bringing people together. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. And I do it with integrity, but also I do it with courage. Because what we have to do is to get in good trouble, get in the way, and not just talk about getting in the way, but really go out in the community and have experience and do something.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Abel Mabel Thomas. Just a reminder, the first time to the candidates, you see my hand with the white piece of paper, 30 seconds to complete your thought. If I bring it up again, 15 seconds to finish your thought. What we don't want to see is for me to bring it up a third time, because then, unfortunately, the league has asked me to cut you off. Keisha Waits,
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. The congressman left us with a quote that many of you may see around the city right now. He indicated that the most powerful tool, nonviolent tool that we have is the power of the vote. I do too. I'm very grateful to the work under the administration of Governor Nathan Deal. I also too joined my colleague in working on criminal justice reform. And so, in fact, recent legislation has come out to support this effort. So certainly the answer is yes. I'm 100% behind supporting any efforts that will give more people the right and the access to vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Franklin, it is your turn.
The great writer Oscar Wilde once said, every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. And I think the notion that you deserve a future no matter what the challenges you faced in life is fundamental to the American experience. I've worked in a significant way over the years on prisoner reentry and spent time in prisons interviewing and working with previously incarcerated people once out. They told us what they needed as they returned to the community. As president of ITC, we developed programs in the faith community to help welcome them so that when people were released, what a terrible metaphor, simply released, there was someone there to catch and bring them home. And finally, as a program officer at the Ford Foundation, I funded many of the programs that many groups that Governor Deal worked with in Georgia took advantage of. So I'm very proud of a strong track record of giving people a second chance.
Thank you very much, Dr. Franklin. And then the last word on this question goes to Kwanzaa Hall.
Thank you. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere is what Dr. King said. And our justice system is not just inherently based on how it was created. But as a council member, I passed the legislation that ensured we banned the box on felon reentry and allowed felons to come and work at the city of Atlanta. That ended up being replicated at the state. So I've been leading on this for many years, and I'll continue to be a supporter of restoring the rights to any individual who has done their time and completed their penance. I have many family members who were incarcerated, who received felonies, and many friends. So I'm 100% staunch advocate for supporting restorative justice.
Thank you very much for that answer, Kwanzaa Hall. Our next question is this. Should we reform the Electoral College system or leave it as is? Yes, no, or why? And the first person to answer that question will be Stephen Muhammad.
Well, as it stands now, leaving the electoral system in place has not been fair. It was put in place for the landowners, the gentry, the rich, when it came into being. So it was a way to keep the upper crust, the elite, in power. So now it does the same thing, but in a different sort of way. The elite candidate who has the ability to just count votes is the one who stays in power. The elite candidate who has the ability to market to certain markets and get the electoral votes to win, but not the popular vote. So there needs to be a reform in the system. It needs to be a reform where there's a balance between the electoral and the popular vote. Just doing one or the other does not create a fair and just system as we speak about justice. So we want a just system that's equally fair to everyone, and that would mean a system that has a balance between those two. It would have to be worked out and set into place into law.
Thank you very much for your answer. Mr. Oliver.
So to completely do away with the Electoral College would require amending the Constitution, which is quite a task. It takes a lot of effort to do that. And while I would support overall getting rid of the Electoral College, one thing we can do is we can pass legislation to reform the Electoral College, to say that the Electoral College should be issuing electoral votes based on the representation of the vote. So if you have 60% of the vote in Georgia, you should be getting 60% of those electoral votes instead of the entire state's electoral votes. That would lead to a more fair Electoral College as we seek to work to pass the amendment needed to ultimately get rid of the Electoral College so that one person equals one vote. I absolutely think that that's something that could be done in the future, but that's a long haul thing. But we can certainly reform the Electoral College in the short term while we work to that ultimate goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Abel Mabel Thomas, it is your turn.
I think that when the whole process of the Civil Rights Movement with the Voting Rights Act, the whole thought was one man, one vote. Subsequently, what we're seeing now is the Electoral College has been used as a tool against the people. You can get more votes, popular votes, and still lose the election. So I think that reform is needed, and I think that there's some momentum building throughout the country around it, especially once people saw how the present president was able to capture it, and knowing that he did not even have the actual popular vote. And so I think it's an issue that is of importance, and I would be willing to advocate it being changed.
Thank you very much, Abel Mabel Thomas. Keisha Shawn Waits, your thoughts on the Electoral College?
Absolutely. Okay, so very, very quickly, the makeup of the country is very different from when the Electoral College was put in place. Currently, I do not believe it's reflective of the nation's wishes, and therefore it disenfranchises the minority parties or those parties that are not in power. And so to answer your question, I would champion and advocate for reform.
Thank you very much. Dr. Franklin, what are your thoughts on the Electoral College?
Ultimately, I think that I would support the abolition, ultimately, or phasing out of the Electoral College. But as colleagues have indicated, this is a serious long-term project. It does need our attention because smaller states, lesser populated states have disproportionate power in our government. The Electoral College is discussed in Article 1 of the Constitution, but it's significant that Article 1 of 1787 also talked about the power of the people, the voice of the people. So we need to restore that with popular election of our leaders, and I would be a strong endorser, although this is not likely to come up during our weeks in service.
Dr. Franklin, thank you very much. Kwanzaa Hall, your thoughts on this issue?
Yes, I support reform, but inherently, as we've said earlier, the U.S. system of government is really inherently flawed based on how it was created, how it's formed on the backs of African slaves or descendants of African slaves. So until we address that inequity truly, we're going to have a DNA of a structure that doesn't work in the favor of the people. So it's a long-term solution that's needed, but at the rate the country's going right now, we probably see a lot more attention to discussions like this in the coming year or so. So thank you very much. But yes, I support reform.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. And final thoughts on this question, we'll go to Barrington Martin II.
Absolutely, but as some of my colleagues stated that it would take an amendment to the Constitution that could take a long time. And since the beginning of my run, even within the primary, I've always stated that we need modern day solutions to modern day problems. A modern day solution to our voting issue, our voting system, would be ranked choice voting. For example, within ranked choice voting, if a candidate wins a majority of first place votes, basically, let me start over. Candidates are ranked based off votes of people. So if a candidate wins a majority of first preference votes, he, she, or is declared the winner outright. Now, if no candidate wins the majority of the first preference votes, then the candidate with the fewest first preference votes is eliminated. And this process is repeated until a winner is shown. Again, I think that we have to look forward as far as our solutions when it comes to these outdated, archaic ways that we've been undergoing within our government. And so I think ranked choice voting will be a positive solution to our voting issues currently. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next question. Should Puerto Rico have members in Congress? Should Puerto Rico have members in Congress? And we will ask Mr. Oliver to be the first one to answer this question.
Well, I do believe that Puerto Rico would need to be a state to have members of Congress. Now, do I support statehood for Puerto Rico? I believe if the people of Puerto Rico would like statehood, I would absolutely support their admittance into the Union. They pay taxes, they're United States citizens, and if they deem that that's what they would like, absolutely they should be admitted as a state and have the same congressional seats as any other state. I would also say the same thing for DC. They should have voting representation in Congress, not merely a delegate who gets to speak but not vote. I think we need to expand the electorate. And again, I'm going to echo my colleague's sentiment here. Ranked choice voting is a way to do that. They have it in Maine, and they should have it in all 50 states because we do need to have more choices and more voices in our debate. And I think Puerto Rico would be an excellent addition to that choir of voices in the United States House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oliver. Able Mabel Thomas, statehood for Puerto Rico, members representation in Congress.
Well, I think I'm open to that thought, but I must admit I have a little bit of favoritism in terms of the issue that I know most about is the whole issue of DC statehood, where Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes has basically been fighting for years, and I think that it's clearly time, because when you look at DC, they have more police on top of them than anything, yet she does not have a vote in the Congress to make a difference. So I think that clearly that's something that I would sort of spend a little bit more of my time on. Yet I do think that Puerto Rico was not treated fairly when they came into the hurricane and the disasters, and I think they do need more support.
Thank you very much. Keisha Shawn Waits.
Yes. Following Hurricane Maria, the United States has pumped billions of dollars into Puerto Rico. And having served there for a little under a year, I've seen the challenges of them not having representation in Congress. And so, yes, to echo the sentiments of my colleague, I believe that Puerto Rico, as well as Washington, D.C., should have members represented in Congress. And I think one of the challenges and reasons why you have not seen that is because I think that would possibly flip the balance of power in the Senate. And so once again, we see partisan politics at work as to how millions of people are potentially being disenfranchised. And so my answer is yes, I would support statehood for Puerto Rico, as well as them having representation in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Franklin, same question.
Yes, Puerto Rico is an important part of this nation, and I fully support statehood, should that be the decision, which has been significantly supported by many of its voters. Puerto Rico, with its population over 3 million, is larger than many the states in the country already. I would focus also on the challenges that Congress will address in the coming weeks. And although Puerto Rican statehood is not likely to be among them, to focus on appropriations, on oversight of a criminal organization known as the Trump administration, and the national crisis of COVID and lack of confidence in our election results is certainly going to be a pressing, burning issue for anyone who occupies a seat and stands in the shoes of John Lewis.
Thank you. Kwanzaa Hall.
Yes, I support statehood and inclusion in our country in a fair and equitable way. Similarly for Washington, D.C., it's kind of an easy answer. We just haven't seen the appropriate leadership in Congress, in the Senate, and in the White House. Sometimes people just don't want to take on the heavy fights, but they've been dangling on the side of the United States for a long time and need to be brought into the fold.
Thank you very much. Mr. Martin.
Yes, ma'am. Again, modern day solutions for modern day problems. I echo the sentiments of Chase that the electorate needs to be expanded. However, if the Puerto Rican citizens would like statehood, then our government should grant it to them. And in that case, then they deserve the congressional representation. So absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Muhammad, you get the final word on this question.
Thank you. Famous American said, taxation without representation is tyranny. And under that formula, we must agree that Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico are living under an absolute tyrannical rule, because Washington, D.C. pays more taxes than 22 states. So with that kind of tax bill, they are not being properly represented. Absolutely, they should go bananas, and they should do all that they could to make sure that they're represented. And Puerto Rico, same thing. They're both not in the representative factor of the United States, so their voices aren't heard. That's the thing that we have now in the streets with Black Lives Matter. The black man and woman of America, their voice is not heard. This is the season and the time to hear the voice of those who have been underrepresented throughout the government, throughout the United States. So what we need is a fair and just system that represents everyone that is paying taxes in America.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muhammad. Compromise is one way that lawmakers are able to get things done. On what issue are you willing to work with members of another party right now? And we begin with Able Mabel Thomas.
Well, the issue that I would like them to work with is dealing with the COVID, because what's happening is they're using the COVID pandemic as a political tool when citizens throughout the United States need it. And so I'd be willing to work with across the aisle to give COVID relief to people throughout the state, specifically the 5th District, because people are hurting. They're in a situation where we need a moratorium on people being put out of their homes as well as renters. We need more business for small funding for small business. We need livable wages, and we also need to work together on this whole criminal justice reform, qualified immunity, to make sure that officers don't get all the privileges and that they don't get punished for their deadly deeds.
Thank you very much, Able Mabel. Ms. Waits.
During my tenure in the Georgia General Assembly, I had the amazing privilege of working across the aisles and passing a couple of bills. In fact, on my Fallen Hero bill, the number 2 sponsor was Chairman Alan Powell, who is a staunch supporter of guns. And generally, he and I agreed on nothing, but we were able to compromise and work together. Nonetheless, I echo the sentiments of my colleague. COVID relief would probably be the number 1 thing on the table. There are a number of small business owners that have not benefited from the SBA funding, the PPPE relief efforts, simply because of their genetic makeup. They may be a one-owner business. They may be non-compliant. They may not have the capacity to even provide any paperwork. 2, working families. There are a number of families who have not received any unemployment benefits that they may have been eligible for and are possibly facing eviction and or foreclosure. And so these are some of the conversations that I look forward to bringing to the table and the capacity to negotiate and work across the aisle. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Franklin.
Part of the genius of the civil rights movement was that leaders were willing to confront and negotiate. Both tactics were essential for moving change forward. John Lewis was a master of confrontation and negotiation. So compromise is simply one tool in that spectrum of confrontation, standing firm, and on the other hand, being willing to talk it through. We have as Exhibit A today, a wonderful model and example of compromise that I would support were I in Washington now. The HEROES Act called for $3 trillion of COVID funding. Mitch McConnell introduced a skinny bill of $1 trillion. Today, I understand that Speaker Pelosi suggested that a $2 million compromise seems appropriate to help families and small businesses in need. That's intelligent compromise.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hall.
Well, inherently, for the 15 years that I served as a council member and school board member, I had to represent Republican interests, Democratic interests, Libertarian, Green Party, Independent interests, all towards a shared vision. So that was par for the course in District 2. I would continue the same spirit of collaboration and coordination, but firmness around things that matter that are part of the agenda I stand for. One of the big measures, of course, everyone has spoken about coronavirus, also justice reform, ensuring that we pass that. And then lastly, I've talked about the federal infrastructure bank, $4 trillion that could be repatriated into America. It's a bipartisan measure. I 100% support it, and I would want District 5 to be the pilot for that, since it's the district with the worst infrastructure, as President Trump has said.
Mr. Hall, thank you very much. Mr. Martin.
Yes, I'm going to say all issues, but to answer the question, I'm going to say healthcare and universal guaranteed income. I say all issues because, again, we have this outdated mindset that there needs to be compromise. I believe that there should not be compromise on necessities in our life. I believe that we all have the same wants and the same needs. However, we just have different ways of getting there. So I think that it's important to come to Capitol Hill with this idea that it's not us versus them when it comes to Democrats and Republicans. But if anything, the pandemic has shown us the holes within our healthcare system. I think it's important to push the issue, of some type of universal healthcare services. Also, low and middle class people cannot be active contributors in a capitalist society unless they obtain jobs or massively increase their purchasing power. The job market has been horrible since the pandemic has started. This is why universal guaranteed income is important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. Mr. Muhammad.
Yes, I would work with Donald Trump on an issue that seems to be the #1 problem or the Republican Party, and that's race. I would talk to him. I'm running on a nonpartisan ticket, a nonpartisan platform, is that I'm not Republican or Democrat. I would work with both sides. And so Donald Trump and his band and his crew, I would work with them and I would talk to them about the issue of race, which irks most black people. The issue of race, most black leaders will not even take a meeting with Donald Trump. They won't meet with him. But when you negotiate something, the first thing you have to do is check your ego at the door. You have to, regardless of what's been said publicly, regardless of what's out in the public, you have to come together, sit down and work it out despite the hurt, and your poor little feelings have been hurt. And oh Lord, I don't like what they said about me. Put that to the side, negotiate a deal, and then we will solve the problems that exist in America. Now,
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And Mr. Oliver, you get the last thought on this question.
So the truth is that, I'm a libertarian. So when it comes to reaching across the aisle, I can reach across the Democratic aisle, reach across the Republican aisle. What do I want to work with Democrats on? Things like criminal justice reform to make our policing and our courts less systemically corrupt and racist. What do I want to work with Republicans on? Well, let's cut the red tape to small business to help unleash the entrepreneurial spirit of the 5th District. And let's fight for fight to flatten out the tax code so that we can take away the special interest carve-outs and lower the rates for everyone to a more equitable rate so that everyone can pay a lower rate instead of just the wealthy and well-connected. But to answer your question, as a libertarian, I can work across the aisle with Democrats or Republicans, and I have a long list of priorities to do with either if I were to serve even longer than just the short period of time that I were able to serve in this term. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oliver. We will move on now to our next question, and it's a long one, so everyone listen closely. Do you support the foreign assistance budget, which makes up less than 1% of the total federal budget? Why this is important: this particular budget helps to build stable economies and infrastructure while giving communities a path out of poverty through access to basics like health facilities, schools, and clean water. And the first candidate to tackle this question will be Ms. Waits.
Yes, the answer is yes. I've seen the benefits of some of these efforts in small rural towns that I visited throughout my years of service, as well as in other nations. And so I think it is essential for every American to be able to prosper and benefit from the resources that we have in our country. So my answer is yes. I do believe that when all of us thrive, our nation thrives in terms of diversity. So my answer would be yes.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Franklin.
Yes, I would support the foreign assistance budget, and I would recommend strongly that we restore American moral leadership in the world. We have been adrift. Our moral compass is broken. We have a president that simply proclaims America first. Meanwhile, the world looks for the kind of responsible, interdependent leadership, respectful leadership that President Barack Obama, George Bush, and other leaders before him provided. I think in particular, if we're going to conquer and flatten the COVID curve, we must restore support for the WHO, the World Health Organization. We must renew non-proliferation agreements with Russia, and we must empower the nation of Haiti. We have a moral obligation to help Haiti because Haiti fought with us during the American Revolution, and Frederick Douglass was a great ambassador from the U.S. to Haiti.
Thank you very much, Dr. Franklin. Kwanzaa Hall.
Yes, I absolutely support the foreign assistance budget. I participated as an elected official with the State Department on several exchange, but more so development programs in foreign nations where We brought our soft power and our special attention to nonviolence, but also economic development as training and sharing of best practices. We need to do more of that. We need to ensure, because the world looks to us for leadership. So I would continue to support that type of initiative, because many of the countries we were talking about, the people look just like me and everyone on this panel. There's a diversity of folks, but a lot are brown people who don't feel that they are getting the fair end of the stick the same way that many people in urban America, black and brown, feel in this country. So yes, absolutely, I support the foreign assistance budget.
Mr. Martin.
Yes, I absolutely support the foreign assistance budget, because essentially a lot of the problems within our society, or not just American society, but worldwide, stems from poverty. And I think that if you're able to attack poverty, you're able to attack many of the issues that are contained within or produced from poverty. So I think it's important that we look at initiatives like the foreign assistance budget, but it's also, I'm going to continue to say it, modern day solutions to modern day problems. And this is why guaranteed income is something that needs to be taken a look at as well, because for us to have so much abundance, but yet so many people around the nation and around the world live in squalor, I think it's important for us to take a look at many different types of initiatives and measures that will increase the purchasing power that people possess, so they can possess the agency over their lives that they need to make the progress and the success they want for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Muhammad, your thoughts on the foreign assistance budget?
Yes, I support that. I support also with them increasing and reinvigorating the Peace Corps, because the Peace Corps was an organization that really did a lot to show forth the greatness of America. There's a lot of talk about making America great again. But when America, if you want to make America great again, you have to make friends in all walks of life. But when you sent young Americans out around the world to make friends and help in countries for no particular gain in it, that they were sent out, this then made friends. Those young people of color, those young people in those countries would then want to come to America, get an education, increase their standard of living, go back home, and then they would go into leadership roles in those governments. And when they went into those roles of government, they made friends with the people that they had met here in America, and it was friendship all throughout the world. But now it's a warring faction, because we are not reaching out like that anymore to nations of color.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Oliver.
All right, so this is going to sound crazy, you guys, because I'm from outside the two-party system, but I think that there are better ways to actually help the economies of developing nations than the current system that we have now. What we have now is a system where we take tax money from poor Americans to give to, in the richest country in the world, to give to the richest people in the poorest countries in the world. What we should instead be doing is providing direct market assistance through microlending into the middle and to grow middle classes in these developing nations. And if we want to talk about foreign assistance, the thing that we can do best to start assisting foreign countries is to stop bombing them. That's how you build up infrastructure, is don't bomb their infrastructure with drone bombs. We talk about violence against black and brown people on our streets in this country, but the truth is we are bombing black and brown people all over the world, and we've been at a generational war since 2001. It's time for these wars to end, and it's time for us to make friends by trading markets, not bombs. And that's the way that we're going to create real foreign relationships, not just with a foreign assistance program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Mabel Thomas.
Yes, I think I'm okay with that percentage going to those different countries throughout the world. But at the same time, America has a history, in Europe as well, of imperialism, neo-colonialism. Subsequently, they've taken advantage of people of color all over the world. And even when you talk about markets, the reality of it is that they don't give money to those on the ground, those people who are the working class, those people who are farmers. They really never get the type of relief. Yet, even though there's corruption sometimes in these countries, what you got to know is the International Monetary Fund holds these countries on a stranglehold. So we've not been fair, even though we may give 1%, we've not been fair specifically to people of color throughout the world, and we continue to live in a world where they want brown and black people to be enslaved through money as well as physical slavery.
Very good. Thank you very much. I think that was all of the candidates on that question. Next, and we're back, we've been one round through everyone. We'll start in with Dr. Franklin, and the question is this. What do you see as America's role in fighting human trafficking, also known as modern-day slavery?
Well, America should stand by the fundamental principle of the human dignity and the sacred and precious worth of every person. We should empathize with families that have faced extreme economic challenge, and many families who have been fragmented because of poverty that our own capitalist market practices have contributed to. Consequently, we see families fragment, we see children on the marketplace, and we see dishonest people take advantage of that. It is wrong, it is immoral, and we should exercise appropriate moral leadership in the world and in our current, in our cities to say that we will not tolerate this. So I want to commend Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, the leaders at the airport, others in our city that have taken a firm stance, raised the issue so that we can work collectively to put an end to human trafficking in the 5th District and throughout the nation.
Thank you very much, sir. Kwanzaa Hall, what should the U.S. be doing to stop human trafficking?
Well, in this case, a lot of the issues start at the very local level, and also they stem all the way out to the border. As a council member, I work very closely with my colleagues, and we've passed several measures, at least to try to strengthen up what we could do at City Hall and to raise awareness at the airport. These large logistics hubs are places where the trafficking happens, the truck stations out on Bankhead, throughout our city, places like Job Corps facilities or where young people are taken and they're forever missing. And also people in the international networks bring children through our country all the time. So we really have to double down on our borders and be more creative about addressing and identifying the problems and the challenges that we have. I've also worked closely with Deborah Richardson over at the Center for Civil and Human Rights to raise awareness. But at the federal level, there still has to be a focus on the border, tracking, tracing, and finding these groups, as we just saw a couple of weeks ago here in Georgia.
Thank you very much.
31 children found.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Martin.
Could you repeat the question one more time for me, please?
Yes, the question is this. What role should the United States play in the effort to stop modern-day slavery, also known as human trafficking?
Well, I first believe that the United States has a history of being hypocritical when it comes to this, because the first and foremost thing that needs to be addressed is the 13th Amendment. We need to amend the 13th Amendment so that slavery could be abolished on all levels, including those that are incarcerated. So I think that ultimately it takes a multi-level approach that starts from the top down and also from the bottom up. And what I mean from the bottom up is I think that it's important for politicians at the city and the state level to increase punishments on individuals involved in human trafficking, because this is something that should not be happening at all under any circumstances within our nation. So I think that we first have to address the 13th Amendment, and then I believe that things will follow after that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Muhammad.
Well, I grew up in an environment that was not the most hospitable. And I saw women that were being pimped. They called it pimping in my day, part of that whole human trafficking. And I saw women that saw them get beat by their pimps. And it was a very terrible life when you see them and what they had to endure in the wintertime in Chicago, below zero, walking the streets. So that's a horrible life for any woman or any young man to face. So it has to be stopped. Atlanta, I think, is 14th, in the top 14 cities of human trafficking in the world. That's what they said, because you have Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. You have sports, entertainment, and hospitality. That's the vehicle that human trafficking rides on. And Atlanta is a leader in those areas. So what you have to do is put in place checks and balances in those industries so that human trafficking can be caught, spotted, and rooted out before it goes too far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Oliver.
So human trafficking. So what can we do with our international partners? Continue to partner with Interpol and provide them the resources they need to fight international trafficking. And what we can do here in the United States is we can focus on crimes that actually have victims like trafficking, as opposed to the over-criminalization of our society that provides for the highest incarcerated rate of people in the entire world. We should be focusing on crimes where there are victims, human trafficking being chief among them. Part of that is also legalizing legal adult sex work, allowing those who do want to participate in that marketplace consenting to do so. But what we can do is by focusing on crimes with actual victims, we can take those law enforcement dollars and that law enforcement focus where it needs to be, namely combating human trafficking of both women and children, and men too. So it is an issue that affects everyone, and it's something that we need to fight all together.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oliver. Abel Mabel Thomas.
I say it's a heavy lift, and people don't want to deal with what's going to be hard. And bottom line, you got to have more punishment. But if you think human trafficking exists just because a couple of bad guys want to destroy the lives of these women and make profit by it, you got to know it's insiders. So I definitely would not want to do anything that will legalize more immoral stuff than it is in America. Because most people think it's okay to go to strip clubs, and the proliferation of strip clubs and the sex industry is huge. And so I think that we need to respect women. And the real truth is people like their sister, their auntie, and their niece, and their mama, grandmama, but there really is no respect for women in the society. And if you really want to deal with whether it's maternal mortality or sexual assault issues, or whether it's issues dealing with reproductive justice, if people love women, these things wouldn't happen. Love women for real, not lip service.
And the final thought on this issue of human trafficking goes to Ms. Waits.
Yes. So what is it that we can actually do to impact the federal level? And this is something that I think can be done in a relatively short period of time. The state of Georgia has actually led on this effort. Right here in the 5th Congressional District, it is home to the world's busiest airport in Hartsfield-Jackson. During my tenure at the Georgia General Assembly, we actually passed legislation to address this very issue. A couple of things happened in that legislation. We created a fund that actually taxed and fined strip clubs to raise funding for wraparound services for individuals who had been a victim of human trafficking. The second thing it did is it required signage in locations where heavily traveled areas, airports, hotels, bus stations, and so forth. And then the third thing it did is it increased penalties for organizers who engaged in this type of crime. So I'd like to see these efforts conducted at the federal level. And there's also been great collaboration, as my colleague indicated, between the city and the state of Georgia on this very effort.
Thank you very much. Now I want to talk about natural disasters. We've experienced great rain just last week, remnants of a hurricane. What specifically, if elected, would you do to ensure that America is able to respond quickly and effectively to people here in our United States and other parts of the world when they are impacted by war and or a natural disaster? And Kwanzaa Hall will be the first to tackle this question.
Thank you so much. So as a council member for the heart of the city, there was a heightened sense of attention to emergency preparedness. So I was far more in contact with the various organizations that operate the emergency prepared systems. But when we had the tornado to hit Atlanta, I was out there with FEMA, with Mayor Franklin, and we began to look at where we still had opportunity to strengthen up our resilience. We've got to lift the resilience of our nation. It's like a volunteer service corps, like the TVA. We've got to get more people prepared to deal with these emergencies because they're not going to stop. And that means we've got to invest in it. We've got to invest in young people being prepared from CPR all the way out to being able to manage the most difficult situations. This is dollars that will be well worth the investment in terms of how it's returned to us in our communities. The doomsday prepping is real. And I think as we discovered through this pandemic, it's very necessary. And I will ensure that we invest in, or at least raise the conversation as a congressperson, but continue to be a part of the discussion.
Thank you very much. Mr. Martin.
Yes, again, modern day solutions to modern day problems. First and foremost, I don't agree with war, and I think that we should divest from our military practices involving ourselves in war. But when it comes to natural disasters, and catastrophic events. I think that we need to have a more so proactive approach more than a reactive. Oftentimes we wait until a situation occurs and then we react from it. I think that we have to go inside, look at the areas that will be highly impacted by natural disasters and ensure that those people have all of the initiatives or all of the things needed so they can be prepared when the disaster hits them. And even if the disaster hits them, we have to be more responsive and produce a modern solutions as to giving them the relief that they need to recover from any type of catastrophe that they may experience in those areas. Thank you.
Mr. Muhammad, same question.
Yes. Every president runs that they're going to be the president of peace. Normally, that's what they say. But once they get in, special interests, corporations, lobbyists, push them into war. Every president has said that they would take us out of this war and won't start another war, and they go in and add another war to the wars that already exist. So that's special interest, corporation, and lobbyists push them into these wars because then it allows them to make money. That's how this cycle is perpetuated. But in terms of FEMA, if my memory serves me correct, GEMA is the model, Georgia Emergency Management Agency, because President Carter, I think if my memory serves, he started FEMA on the federal level, but he modeled after the GEMA that he started here in Georgia. So at one point, that particular agency was designed to help disasters. It went in and took care of the people, took care of the governments, and made sure that the needs were provided. He created the same thing on a federal level, but it has been sort of skewed
Thank you very
in the
much.
last few years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Oliver.
So I'm going to start echoing the sentiments of my colleagues here about how we need to end war and actually focus more on things here at home. I'm sure many of you have read the stories since the Oregon wildfire about how the Oregon National Guard's firefighting helicopters are actually being used overseas in our war effort. So they're not there to actually fight the fires that they were designed to be fighting. So yeah, we need to take focus off of this war machine, this corporate war machine in the Pentagon industrial complex, the military industrial complex. And we need to take those funds back here so we can prepare for things like hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires. And wildfires, of course, are going to increase as the planet gets warmer. So we need to be prepared for these eventualities. We need to see these things coming because it's not as if they're not predictable. They are predictable. We should know that they're coming. And now that we've had a once-in-a-century pandemic, we need to add pandemics to that list of things we need to be ultimately prepared for in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we will hear from Abel Mabel Thomas.
What we have, first of all, I serve on the Natural Resource and Environment Committee at the state level. And so I know that we have to deal with the issue of climate change, global warming, making sure that more money is not put in the military, but more money is put to make sure that our families are safe. I'll just put it like Hurricane Katrina really told it all as to what was happening with our people and how they were not prepared. And even after this period has happened, there still has not been money put in place to stabilize Katrina because every time we're worried about that being a problem. We need to deal with low carbon emissions, electric cars, solar, and we need to deal with the fact that we need to have, as was spoken, emergency preparedness, not as a thought, but an action item. And the only place I know that had a hurricane and a flood was the English Avenue Vine City that I live in, and we handled it based upon teamwork and getting resources from GEMA.
Thank you very much. Ms. Waits.
Yes. So the Stafford Act, which is authorized by Congress, provides a pot of funds to actually fund FEMA. And so FEMA is the agency responsible for addressing natural disasters throughout our country. Certainly there's a lot of bureaucracy. There are a number of states that don't necessarily get their fair share, and that we can address later. But regarding the issue of war, that is a separate conversation that would not fall under the purview of FEMA. That would actually fall under our military and our next chief in terms of who we decide is president of the United States. And so I think it's essential that we have someone that has the hearts and minds of American people and has a level of empathy and compassion necessary so that we don't find ourselves in these unnecessary wars. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last thought on this question then now goes to Dr. Franklin.
Yes, I would point out that you asked both about war and natural disasters. And I don't know if the audience is aware that two of our colleagues who appear to be working in the dark may not be aware that there were some challenges. So I just want to commend both of them for their resilience during this challenging time. I've been affected, we've all been affected by storms and power outages. There are three experiences that I would draw upon as I respond to the set of challenges here. And certainly with the West Coast currently on fire and the numerous hurricanes and floods we're facing, we need to be more prepared. I was the president of the Regional Council of Churches in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina struck. We mobilized a massive public-private effort to respond to need to relocate people. As a program officer at the Ford Foundation, I played a key role in building the capacity of international relief organizations like CARE. And finally, I have traveled to Antarctica and I have seen climate warning in action. We need to respond.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. All right, now I've got a new question, and we are going to start with Mr. Martin, and we're going to talk about some of the most vulnerable among us. Preventable deaths of children under the age of 5 have been nearly cut in half since the year 1990. Yet the budget for international maternal and child health programs, those are often targeted for cuts in the appropriations process. Do you support these programs? And if so, how will you work to ensure funding continues to be a priority? Mr. Martin.
Yes. Modern day solutions to modern day problems. Universal health care is important. Again, modern day solutions to modern day problems. It's important for us to have universal health care, especially within a nation that has so much abundance that we have within the United States. And I think that when we discuss budgeting, it's funny to me that when things like this come up to Capitol Hill, people always want to know how much it costs, but yet it's never an issue to bail out the corporations or the banks or the big businesses that often don't need the help as much as the people do. So I think that ultimately with this pandemic, we've seen the holes within our healthcare system. We've seen just how bad the healthcare system has treated the people of this nation, and it's dire that at the very minimum, we get universal basic healthcare services if we can't achieve the goal of universal healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Muhammad.
Yes, I think that right now that healthcare is definitely needed. We need to create a system, maybe with the stimulus package, that they slide in at least a few hundred billion to help with subsidize healthcare for the next year or two in America. There are a lot of people that are going to be suffering from the after effects of COVID. There'll be people who suffering from different things that we need to sort of mitigate by having a fund, creating an emergency fund that can help all throughout America, hospitals, doctors, or what have you, so that when they're taking care of people and they don't have the money because they have to have the care because of the effects of the COVID virus, that they will be able to get it when it happens, because universal health care seems to be a problem. President Franklin Roosevelt couldn't do it, and he was the most powerful president we've seen in the last 100 years.
Thank you, Mr. Muhammad. Now, Mr. Oliver, we're talking about how do you prioritize funding for programs for healthcare for children?
Excellent. So let's talk about the priorities we have here. So I find it funny that people even talk about cutting things like healthcare for children when there are certainly other things in the budget that are much easier to cut. Why are we talking about cutting welfare for children when we're not talking about cutting welfare for corporations? Is that because the two-party system is bought and paid for by these large corporate interests? I happen to think so. I happen to think this is why oftentimes it is those who have the least who get the least amount of attention from our political establishment. You know, they don't have special carve-outs and the tax code the way big businesses does because they can't afford lobbyists to go in front of our elected officials and basically buy and pay for those carve-outs. So yeah, when it comes to priorities, welfare is certainly not on the priority for children. Is not certainly on my priority of things that I would be cutting, considering we have wars to cut, we have corporate welfare to cut, and lots of other programs that do a lot more harm than helping out kids with health insurance.
Thank you very much. Same question to Abel Mabel Thomas.
I think
You muted yourself, Abel Mabel.
I think that this gives me an opportunity to talk about the fact that maternal mortality is one of the big issues in the country. Black women die 3 to 4 times more than any other race at childbirth. Whether it be infant mortality, we lag in Georgia, and actually we're worse with maternal mortality. I was able to put into the budget $21 million to deal with postpartum Medicaid, because they don't do statistics from 1 year, from 1 day. They do it from a year. And these women are dying once they get home, hemorrhaging, and other issues. So I will work with women in the legislature, Ayanna Pressley, Congresswoman, because that's her top issue. That's been my top issue. And women and family, if you empower women, you empower families. I stand for women.
Thank you very much. Keisha Sean Waits.
Yes. One of the reasons that I think it's so important that you have women serving in Congress is that oftentimes we tend to legislate very differently. And even though many call these feel-good issues, these are issues that directly impact all of us in the community. At some point, you're going to be a child and you're going to be a senior. There are two pieces of legislation that are before Congress as we speak. It's H.R. 7909 and Senate Bill 2683. And I think these are two pieces of legislation that are commensurate with exactly what we're talking about. These are issues that have to be made a priority. And I think it's important that during this short window of time that we champion and provide the hard data and science that indicate that when these funds are available, we start to see a reduction. And when they're not made available, we start to see challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let's see, now Dr. Franklin.
I would focus on my 90-day legacy or less in terms of 3 principal areas in the health response. Number 1, putting pressure on the state to expand Medicaid. That is critical. Second, we need to protect and improve the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. And third, and here I want to commend Representative Thomas, because she has been a leading voice and deserves credit for her leadership on maternal health and extending the postpartum coverage. We need to extend it beyond a couple of months, beyond even 6 months to a year. My wife is a physician and a public health professional. She's a big fan of Abel Mabel Thomas, because that leader put her reputation on the line and led change, and I want to commend you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Franklin. Final thoughts here from Kwanzaa Hall.
Well, with the short period of time, I'm 100% supporter of, having the system to do far more for children and families. But for the 90-day period that I would serve, I would focus on justice for children through the COVID relief. And that would be a strategy to navigate the CARES Act and any other sources of funding that are on the table to carve out pieces that go direct to families and children who have been extremely impacted negatively in the last few months by this. But it could create a restorative situation and pathway for more legislation in the future, or enhance other pieces of legislation that are on the table. So it would be a strategic measure to leverage what's already out there, but ensure that dollars are doled directly to that need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on now to another subject, another question, and it will begin with Mr. Muhammad. The question is this: how do you see faith-based organizations, non-governmental organizations, and our government working together to help fight extreme poverty?
Well, I see them using the model of a great organization here in Atlanta called the Concerned Black Clergy, faith-based organization that works across all religious, political, social, and cultural lines to come together. They identify a problem. They were built on homelessness. They will identify a problem. They will then reach out to the different various agencies, bring everybody to the table, sit them down, and then come up with a solution on where everyone can make their contribution the way that they can to solve the problem. So that would be a model for me in terms of how it would be done. They have an excellent model. They've done excellent work here in the city of Atlanta. And I think that taking that model the same way President Carter took GMA to FEMA, we could take the Concerned Black Clergy, the CBC, nationally the model that they use and solve the problems between the different agencies.
Thank you very much. Mr. Oliver.
So I absolutely think NGOs are a vital part of solving the crises that we have in our country. I find that a lot of times NGOs are much more reflexive and able to adapt to conditions on the ground than a top-down government structure. And so I think anytime that we seek to solve a problem, we should be looking for non-governmental options, and that includes in the realm of the faith-based organization. Of course, we would want all of these groups that work with our government to be as inclusive as possible to everyone, regardless of race, creed, sexual orientation, or gender. But I think that we should be able to partner with these groups to provide the best services for the taxpayer. That is why libertarians often support going outside of the government realm and looking for those non-governmental organizations to help solve these crises.
Thank you very much. Abel Mabel Thomas.
I don't think we could make it without the faith-based, because in our history, the church was always the center of our gathering and our outreach and inreach. So I think that that's important. NGOs serve a very strong purpose because sometimes bureaucrats and those people cannot reach in and really get to the people, serve the people at a level. So I think it's a very critical role. And I also think that more people need to understand the role of NGOs, and so that more people of color will take this opportunity to serve. And I also would like to thank the League of Women Voters, which I am a member of, for the work you do in terms of outreach to make sure education around the issues of our lives is put before the public. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Waits.
Yes, I simply want to echo that the faith community has always been the cornerstone and backbone of our communities when it comes to social justice issues. You've seen them take the front seat in conversations such as Moral Mondays. I've seen them at the Capitol in terms of opportunities to partner when you see outcries for situations such as the recent ruling regarding Breonna Taylor. And so there is a unique opportunity. I'm very proud of the work that I've seen right here in the 5th District regarding the collaborations for getting food assistance out to families that are struggling. A number of churches are assisting with rental as well as resources for individuals who are facing foreclosures and evictions. And so I think there's a unique opportunity to potentially disseminate more funding through faith communities. Thank you.
And thank you. Dr. Franklin.
I appreciate the question. I want to take slight issue with it because it leaves out an important partner. Of course, faith-based organizations and nonprofits or NGOs should play a critical role in poverty alleviation. That was, again, some of the work I did as a program officer at the Ford Foundation. But as president of Morehouse College, I work with other presidents, with community leaders, with all of the faith community to focus on transforming and offering hope to people in the historic West Side District. Consequently, today, you can Google the West Side Futures Fund. The chair of the board is the extraordinary Beverly Daniel Tatum. They are building training, workforce development, employing people, empowering people to acquire homes. But the private sector has more money than the philanthropic sector. So Delta, Coca-Cola, Arthur Blank Foundation also were brought to the table. That's the key. And ultimately, Robert Smith, the billionaire who's devoting banks should give 2% of their
Thank you very much, sir.
to alleviate poverty.
Thank you very much, sir. Kwanzaa Hall.
Yes, as a council member for District 2, I had over 100 churches, very large and significant churches, not that any is not, as well as it was the capital of the NGOs in the city, CARE, the large international organizations like American Cancer Society, the Carter Center, the King Center, and many, many other organizations that all worked in collaboration. But when I came into office, it's not that everyone was working on the same page, so we were able to bring people towards a shared vision of working collaboratively at the local level, but also for them to continue to do their international work. So I would surely support our faith-based organizations who received some support with the CARES Act, but I would double down on that. Many of the projects that we did in the Old Fourth Ward and in District 2 were replicated on the West Side and other parts of the city because we were breaking new ground years ago, innovating in community and economic development well before it was cool to support neighborhoods that were depressed. And we did it in a collaborative fashion, working with our faith-based leaders at Ebenezer Church, Big Bethel, the churches on Peachtree Street. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hall. Final thought on this question goes to Mr. Martin.
Yes, Mr. President, could you repeat the question one more time, please?
Yes, the question was, how do you see faith-based organizations, NGOs, and the government working together to fight extreme poverty?
I believe that the faith-based organizations and the NGOs should only serve or are only obligated to galvanize the people. I think that it's incorrect to place an obligation on them to fight the poverty more so than it is for the government. I think that the gap needs to be bridged between the people and the government, because oftentimes you will see that political leaders are so far removed from the problem. It takes these organizations to come into play to galvanize the people and to tell the government what needs to happen in these communities. I think that going forward, the government has to do a better job in establishing a relationship with these organizations, but also many of the businesses that are within the communities of these organizations need to also do more to give back to these organizations, but more notably to the people who are involved within these communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got time for one more question, and then we will move into the final statements from the candidates in tonight's forum. Our last question, which will first go to Mr. Oliver, is this. If elected, how will you address global matters such as racism in our communities, given this current climate?
So that is an excellent question. And, I will let's go ahead and say what's on my mind right now is that the way we combat racism is to call it out where we see it. Racism is repugnant. Bigotry is wrong. And we have to be the voice that's going to stand up for it. And I will say this is the only white man in the race. I have been fighting racism my entire life. I have been the person in the room who sees the off-color joke, who has to call someone out and say, what you are doing is wrong. You are dehumanizing people. I've had to deal with bigotry throughout my life as an LGBT American. I've been called many words you can't say on TV because of who I am and my identity. So I deeply, deeply feel personal about the fight against bigotry, discrimination, and racism in this country and around the world. And that is why my platform is so focused on issues that disproportionately affect communities of color and poorer communities. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take your thoughts on this now. April Mabel Thomas.
We're in a society that is institutional racism, structural racism, and almost everybody you run into that's white will tell you, number one, they are not racist. However, they'll tell you that black people are racist, but mostly what we are may be prejudiced, because no matter how we feel about a person, we cannot affect their job, we cannot affect their lifestyle. And so I think that the race issue is one that must be confronted directly, but it has a lot to do with white people, Europeans, actually getting off their horse and trying to defend it and be afraid that what we want is to take everything. We just want equity and to be left alone, and also stand for reparations.
Thank you very much. Ms. Waits.
Yes. I don't think we can really have the full breadth of the conversation without addressing the larger conversation, and that is addressing our differences. I don't think you can champion the issue of racism if you're not willing to tackle the issue of xenophobia regarding the immigrant community. If you're not willing to join the fight against our trans women and men being slaughtered around our nation, and if you're not willing to tackle the issue of homelessness, which is one of the most hated populations nationwide. And so I think if we're going to have a real conversation surrounding any racism, I think we need to have the broader conversation and bring others into the fold in terms of how we address our diversity and how we truly unite on every different level to protect all Americans and Georgians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Franklin.
3 quick points. First of all, I would note that we have 2 extraordinary patron saints of fighting racism and anti-Semitism and promoting greater inclusivity and respect. Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg and John Lewis. And the work that I would do in Congress would be done in the spirit of those two extraordinary inspirations. I think the leader of the 5th District must have a global perspective. I've traveled to all 7 continents, and I've especially paid attention to areas where progress in racism and overcoming racism has been made, particularly South Africa. America needs a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Finally, all Americans at this time of racial reckoning need to read, and I recommend White Fragility, the book by Robin DiAngelo, and the book How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. 2 books: Read, Dialogue, and Act.
Thank you, sir. Kwanzaa Hall.
Well, we have inherited imperialism, colonialism, and American slavery. So I'm 100% supporter of descendants of African slaves having reparations in a truly restorative way. And I also believe that as a leader in Congress, I would be a person who would be courageous enough to put these ideas on the table squarely, because I would not be seeking re-election or looking for a capstone on my career, but someone who could speak truth to power, because this country controls at its very center of mass most of this discussion around racism. So we've got to get to the root, because it's in the DNA of America. And until we pull it out of the DNA and resplice those genes, we're going to have it with us. So leaders in our country have to be willing to speak about it whenever they get a chance and spread that so that every citizen speaks the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And the final thought on this question goes to Mr. Martin.
May I have the question one more time, please?
Yes. If elected, how will you address global matters such as racism, considering our current climate?
I think that we have to be honest. Excuse me. I think we have to have an honest conversation about racism, because essentially racism is a people problem. It's a cultural problem. It's a person problem. And what I mean by that is oftentimes we say things like systematic racism, when essentially it's not the system that's racist, it's the people or the gateholders of that system. So I think that eventually there needs to be an overhaul of the system. There are still people to this day, they're in powerful positions who were around when Jim Crow was legal, who were around when segregation was okay, and they decide some of the biggest rules or some of the biggest decisions that are made in today's society. So I think that we have to address it as it is, and just do a overhaul to make the advances of our the advances of our people that need to be made. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Muhammad, you also now get to answer this question.
Okay. Thank you. Well, addressing racism, in 2003, I wanted to experience as a Muslim. I went to Israel and I stayed for a month, and I prayed at the Wailing Wall with Jewish rabbis from Brooklyn. I spoke at the Israeli Agricultural College. I went to Haifa, went all around, went to the West Bank, Gaza, all throughout Israel, just to experience what racism is like or injustice is like in another country. So I went, and just to see how I would be treated. I know I'm treated in America, so I said, I want to see how I'm treated there. And what I found out is that all over the world, what people want is safety, security, love, and respect. And that's what I found out when I would go throughout Israel. They just wanted safety. They wanted to make sure that their children weren't killed by Palestinians. Palestinians wanted to make sure their children weren't killed by Israelis. In America, it's the same thing. We want to make sure that we get freedom, justice, and equality, and we're treated fairly. So that's what everybody's looking for. And somehow the political leaders miss that point. They miss it.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir, Ms. Muhammad. We want to say thank you to everyone who has joined us for tonight's forum. We are now going to transition to the part of the program where we invite the candidates to deliver a 1-minute closing statement. At the beginning of the forum, we went in alphabetical order to deliver these statements. To close the forum, we will go in reverse alphabetical order, and that would give the first closing statement to Keisha Shawn Waits.
Again, thank you to tonight's organizers. Thank you to the Atlanta League of Women Voters. I am a lifelong resident of the 5th District of 47 years. I'm a homeowner as well as a small business owner. I will not attempt to fill the shoes of Congressman Lewis, but I think it's essential that his successor embody his same spirit of service in terms of continuing his legacy. I offer a successful legislative track record in terms of working across the aisles. I offer a decade of federal services where I have relationship at the state as well as at the federal levels of government that I think will be essential to being effective in Congress. Congress is currently in session debating important bills and issues that are directly impacting our district as well as our state. It is necessary that the successor have the experience necessary to navigate this complex and tumultuous environment. So thank you for your support tonight, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Next, we will hear from Mabel Thomas.
I am the most qualified candidate for the unexpired term of John Lewis. I also am the only elected official that endorsed John Lewis when he ran for Congress in 1986. Many raised the name of John Lewis up, but few have marched with him and few have been on the ground with him taking care of the little man. The relativity is, I believe that all people in this Zoom call have good intention, but intention is not the way to go to Congress. Leadership, experience, results, and being on the ground with the people. I have a brand called availability, results, leadership, and teamwork. I thank you for the opportunity. Send Able Mabel to Congress, www.ablemabel.com. I will get the job done.
Thank you very much. Our next closing statement goes to Mr. Chase Oliver.
So I first want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum tonight. My platform is about more choices and more voices, having more choices on the ballot and more voices in the debate. The League of Women Voters historically has been a group that has provided debate inclusion, so I wanted to go ahead and thank your organization for that. I am fighting for criminal justice reform. During the limited amount of time I would serve, I have a specific set of goals, and that is getting the End Qualified Immunity Bill passed through Congress and passing a 50 states Voting Rights Act. I care deeply about each and every person in the 5th District, and I will fight for each and every person in the 5th District. I'm someone who does not just talk the talk, though I'm glad we've got to speak on issues here today. I'm walking the walk tomorrow. I encourage my fellow candidates and everyone to get out to the march at 5 p.m. tomorrow as we march to the Capitol to talk about issues of criminal justice reform and for justice for people like Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, George Floyd. There's too many to name, so we need to get out and be active, and I encourage everyone to do that. Thank you very much. Go to chaseforhouse.com for more info about my campaign. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oliver. Our next closing statement is going to come from Mr. Stephen Muhammad.
Thank you. We have a very diverse campaign over here at the Muhammad for Congress. Back when Doug Alexander, who was a city councilman, who was Jewish and he's white, I was his co-campaign manager when he ran for president of city council. I worked with him. And one of the things that he said to me one day, he said, I never felt the hostility from black people that I'm feeling now that I'm running for city council. And so I said, bro, that's just the way it is because they don't want to see you in that position. I feel that you're the best person in that position. Several of the people that ran during that time do not speak to me to this day. They still don't speak to me, black people. So I understand what having biases is, but we need a city that creates justice for all, regardless of creed, class, or color. That's what you'll get with the Muhammad campaign and Muhammad in Congress. www.muhammadforcongress.org to create a new reality for all the people of the 5th District. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muhammad. Now we get a closing statement from Mr. Barrington Martin II.
Yes, ma'am. I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for having me and giving me this opportunity to speak with everyone about my plans for this district as well as the nation. I think it's important to note that I ran against the great congressman in this year's primary because I understood the notion and the fact that it's time for a new direction. I have or possess so much respect for a lot of my colleagues on this panel because they served the city well. However, in their tenure, a lot of these problems that we're seeing within our district have persisted and at times have gotten worse. What I'm simply offering is a new direction, a new way, a way that will save the people today, but preserve the future for everyone tomorrow. My entire campaign is based on empowering the people of this district as well as empowering the people of this nation. Please log on to www.votethedream.com and just see what I have in store for the people. It's now or never. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Closing statement next will come from Kwanzaa Hall.
Thank you so much to the League. John Lewis was a neighbor and dear friend to me and my family. He and his late wife, Lillian Lewis, mentored me in high school, college, and throughout my 15 years on Atlanta City Council and school board. So for me, serving the remainder of his term in Congress is not an opportunity for me to start building a political resume or to place a capstone on the end of my career. This is a personal obligation for me to continue the justice leadership in District 5, started by Ambassador Andrew Young and continued by Congressman Lewis. I'm running to inspire the next generation of justice warriors in the city of Atlanta, Fulton County, Clayton, and DeKalb counties. I'm urging everyone to vote for me. Vote early tomorrow. Vote on Tuesday, September 29th, so we can win this race without a runoff. Again, thank you to the League for having me.
Thank you very much to Kwanzaa Hall. And our final closing statement this evening goes to Dr. Robert Franklin.
Thank you to the League and to you, Ms. Presley. I'd like to note that a lot of fine people are running for this office to fill John Lewis's seat, but only one of us will go to Congress after next Tuesday's election. I believe I'm the leader the 5th District needs in Congress when politics without principle is taking priority over the people. Without a decisive win on Tuesday, we all lose. We lose 2 months of a 3-month term because the runoff is scheduled for December, just days before Congress adjourns. I hope you'll remember that when you go into the voting booth and vote for Robert Franklin, top of the ticket. At a time of national crisis, we need a leader with national stature and a moral voice. Remember the words of the rabbi who said, the world is equally balanced between good and evil. Your next act will tip the scale. Thank you.
And thank you very much. We want again to say thank you to all of the candidates for participating in tonight's forum for the unexpired term of the late Congressman John Lewis. I will now turn it back over to my colleagues at the League of Women Voters for any final instructions or any final thoughts.
Thank you, and thank you all for participating. Nicola, would you like to say a few words to close us out?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I want to say thank you for joining us this evening for our District 5 Special Election Forum. As stated, I am Nicola Hines. I am the president of the League of Women Voters for Atlanta Fulton County. I would like to say thank you to our own moderator, Candace Presley, for moderating this great event. I also want to say thank you to all the candidates for participating in our forum. I want to thank the League of Women Voters of Georgia for being our partner for this important forum. And last but not least, I would like to say thank you to our VP of Voter Services and the Voter Services Committee for another great event. This committee has been actively organizing forums and voter registrations since they've was put in place since July. Our board is brand new. We just got voted in at the end of May, and it has been nonstop with all of our elections that are happening here in the city of Atlanta and Fulton County. So they once again put on a great event this evening to inform our citizens of what's important. I wouldn't be a president if I couldn't talk about some administrative stuff. So we're going to go ahead and tell you that we're a nonpartisan political organization that is non-gender biased, meaning that we accept both male and female members. So if you're interested in becoming a member for the League of Women Voters, please go to our website, LWVAF.org. All the information on how to become an active member is on our website. So we're definitely looking forward to increase our member numbers. Also, I want to say, please follow us on social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And that's where you can find out about our events, what's going on in the community, and also about more voter education information that we post there. And last, do not forget to fill out your Census 2020 if you have not done that yet. That is the most important about our communities. That's where we get our funding from the federal government. So Census 2020, go to mycensus2020.gov. And if you would like to know more information about your ballot, you can go to vote411.org. And if you want to know about your voter status, you want to go to My Voter Page Georgia, which is mvp.sos.ga.gov. I've been saying that so many times I forgot the dot. Once again, this has been a great event. Everyone remember that this is an important time in our political history. And I don't want this special election to go by the wayside. Just as it was important for November 3rd, next Tuesday is even more important. So remember, before you leave, have an educated plan to vote before you go to the polls. And once again, I just want to say thank you to everyone. I appreciate you all joining here. Stay safe, stay sound, and stay sane as we're still dealing with the pandemic.